hope you're doing really well and welcome to my spoiler-free review of The Marks Left on Her by D. Lebowitz. So this is a fantastic book that I read earlier in the year, and I've been meaning to do a spoiler-free review for it for a while, but I've just been sort of getting into the swing of things with BookTube and deciding which books I want to give dedicated reviews for versus ones that I'll just review briefly in my wrap-up videos, and I've just been meaning to do this basically for ages. It's, you know, because I keep thinking more people should read it, and then I go on Goodreads and it's only got like 47 ratings, which is absolutely fucking criminal because it is a fantastic book. It follows the struggles of a girl who's a survivor of sexual assault, and you follow her life as she grows up in Hong Kong as a mixed-race girl in a household with her bipolar mother, absentee father, and a very Catholic grandmother. We follow her through her life as she grows up, goes to school, ends up moving across from Hong Kong to Paris, and as her life changes, and then when she's assaulted later in her life, and how that affects her and how she continues on after that, and just everything sort of leading up to that afterwards, and just her life just in general up until until current days. It's a story of survival inspired by the Me Too movement, particularly the author reflecting on the fact that a lot of the stories from the Me Too movement were very whites dominated, and she as a woman of colour really felt that she couldn't connect to a lot of the stories told as, you know, it's an entirely different story for women of colour when it comes to stories such as those seen in the Me Too movement. Now, obvious trigger warnings for sexual assault, physical abuse, self-harm on page, suicide attempt and body horror. Yeah, just a warning there for people if that's something you're not comfortable listening about, or listening to someone talk about, or reading about. So yeah, as I said, this book is just a fantastic story, you know, and it's kind of hard to review because obviously, you know, it's a memoir, so I can't really talk about, you know, the usual things that I would do, which is, you know, plot, characters, world building, themes and stuff. But, you know, so it's always been quite interesting for trying to review this book when I have in the past. I'm going to start with just the format though. First of all, the main character is simply known as Girl. She's never given a name, she's never called a name by anyone else, she's just referred to as the girl, the woman. And I just think that's such an interesting idea to do in a story about this sort of material. You know, it really makes you as the reader empathise and put yourself in her shoes, and, you know, it really just emphasises the fact that this could happen to any girl or woman that you walk past in the street, sort of thing. You know, it's just the girl. And an idea that the author has brought up in interviews and stuff is, you know, the Me Too movement, as I mentioned. And, you know, one of the things about that movement that really highlighted was that, you know, this has happened to just about every woman. You know, every woman out there can relate to a lot of the things that happen in this book, or can come forward and tell their own stories. It really becomes such a knock-on effect when one person stands up and tells their story. So by calling the character just the girl or the woman, you know, it really just, I think, drives home that it could be anyone, because it is anyone, and quite often it is everyone that these sorts of things happen to, or things similar to what happened in this book. I thought it was just a very well written account. I think it's, you know, it's a mix of just prose and then some chapters that are just full lists of things, or just dialogue, entire dialogue, and there's even some poems in here. And I think that's just a really interesting format. I really enjoyed reading it. It kept things interesting, and I think as well, because the author has spoken in interviews about how she started writing this book as a way to process everything that happened to her and just to understand and then try and move on from it and heal. And I think having the format of, you know, just remembering, you know, an entire chapter about dialogue really hammers home that, you know, really indicates that she's remembering a conversation she had with somebody, or there's a whole chapter of like list of Papa's wisdom, which is the sort of name for her grandmother, you know, and it's like you really understand that character just from like little lists of things that she said to her as she's grown up. And the poems as well are just, they really just give that feeling of like almost jotting down and writing down what's happened to you in a way to try and understand it, rather than as a way to communicate it to other people, which I thought was just really interesting to read. And it's all written quite simply, so, you know, like I said, this deals with a lot of heavy things, from, you know, being straight up sexually assaulted, to being abused, to being taken advantage of, to just men on the street and in public just trying to take advantage of her and trying to hurt her. And you know, everything is sort of written quite plainly, almost as if a sort of, you know, it's like, right, here's what happened, here's how I felt about it. And it's, you know, it doesn't dress it up, it doesn't dress it down, it doesn't try to make it like lyrical writing or anything, it just very simply sort of almost states and describes what happened in that moment. And I quite liked it about that. I liked that it didn't try to be some great big sweeping statement about what it means to be a survivor of sexual assault. It doesn't try to make great big sweeping philosophical statements about what it means to be a mixed race woman, what it means to be, you know, a survivor of assault, what it means to be a woman in general. But at the same time it does, simply by just being a simple account of this woman's life and how she's survived the things she's gone through. Which is just, you know, I'm always just so impressed and by how the fact that the author has been able to write this down and publish it with her name on it and things like that. It just takes so much courage to be able to stand up and like tell your own story. It takes so much bravery from all the women who have been assaulted who come forward. You know, it's really just so, you know, it takes such courage to be able to do that. And that's another thing that I just sort of was thinking throughout reading this entire book. Clearly written this book first for herself and a way to understand what's happened and process and heal. But then secondly, in the same way that a lot of Me Too stories, it's for other women to read and look at and empathise with, or even, you know, understand what's happened to them in and of themselves and point and go, that happened to me too. And just like knowing that, you know, someone else has gone through something similar and you're not crazy, you were wronged, you were hurt. It's not something you did and not something you you know, provoked, you know, it's not your fault sort of thing. Reading about other people's stories and hearing about other women's stories really just, I think, helps just a lot of people understand what has happened to them and understand that they really are not to blame. I was watching this really interesting video that Sex Education put out, because if you've seen Sex Education, which is the Netflix TV show, in the second series one of the characters goes through a storyline of being sexually assaulted in public, and they released a video on YouTube, about half an hour long. I'll leave a link to it, it's really great, of just 4 women discussing their experiences with assault and just talking about it in general. And there's this one part where they sort of like point out that sometimes when you come forward and tell someone your story, you're not looking for, oh, we should do this, we should do that, and you're also not looking for, you know, because a lot of times you come forward with your story, you'll be told, oh, what were you wearing, what did you do, how is this your fault? Sometimes you just want someone else to go, I hear you, I understand you, you are not to blame, this happened to me too. And I think this is sort of, you know, one of the reasons the author has said she wrote this was so that other people, particularly women of colour, because as said before, the Me Too movement was very white women dominated, and I think a lot of women of colour felt that their stories weren't getting told, and Lebowitz was one of them, and so she decided to come forward, tell her story in this book so that other women and other women of colour could see themselves represented in a similar story and could connect with that and understand it. Like, I was just so moved reading this entire book, and, you know, as I said, for us to sort of read about other people that these things have happened to, even small things, it almost like jogs your memory as to things that have happened to you that you didn't really realise at the time were, you know, inappropriate or borderline assault. One thing that happened to me when I was about 15, 16 was I had this guy that I worked with, older man, and it's only literally in like the last couple of months or something that I realised that he was incredibly inappropriate to me as a minor. He just used to say a couple of things here and there, and it got brushed off by literally everybody else. They were like, oh, well, that's just, we'll call him, I don't want to use his real name, let's call him Lewis. Oh, that's just Lewis, that's just what he's like, you know. He just says things like that, you just brush them off. It's like, that was really inappropriate and should not have been said to a 15, 16-year-old girl who, you know, and so reading about stories and things almost makes you look back and actually go, hang on, wait, that wasn't right, that I wasn't safe in that moment actually, and I should have, you know, they should have done something about that. So that's one reason why I find stories like these so important to read, not just for myself but then for other people. I think one thing that really stands out to me for this book is how it puts together the many ways that this one person has been used and abused by various different people and men throughout her life. You know, like, when we talk about the Me Too movement, we talk about sexual assault, we're not just talking about being raped. We're talking about when we get felt up in public. We're talking about when people are saying inappropriate things to us and we feel unsafe but no one does anything about it. You know, you feel backed into a corner by someone in power. You feel so helpless a lot of the time because it's not straight up physical sexual assault sometimes. You spend your entire time going, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. And that's why I just think that the whole, for D. Lebowitz to come out and write this book is just so, like I said, brave, and I'm still so in awe that she was able to write this and publish it. But it's just so important, I think, for people to read stuff like this. Not just women, but men as well, to read books like these and actually understand what we mean when we say that we're scared, that we don't feel safe. Because it's a lot of the little things as well as the bigger stuff that really just all contribute to this culture where lots of women, and also particularly women of colour, don't feel safe in a lot of environments. The chapters that really stood out to me were at the beginning where she's just a young girl, she's a little kid, and there's this man that's like looking at her and standing too close and making her feel uncomfortable. It's just sort of highlighting how early it starts for some girls. And then there's another chapter where there's this police officer who, because she's having to deal with something that happened at work, she needs to give a statement, and the officer asks for her phone number, and obviously she leaves it because he sort of phrased it in the way as to, so I can contact you about the case. But then she ends up getting all these, really inappropriate texts from him, and when she doesn't answer or reciprocate, it's, oh, you bitch, and stuff like that. And there's this one line in here where she sort of goes, how did it come to this? How did it get to this? I left my phone number with a police officer for a case, and now he's sending me threatening messages. How did it get to this? And just that line really just stuck with me. I think because it's also something I've thought myself. It's like, because one thing that happened to me was I was just walking to college one morning and this guy turned around and asked me for directions, and I said, sorry, I don't know where that is. And then he starts a bit of conversation, which is fine, people are polite, and you sort of talk a little bit, and then, and then it goes from just, asking for directions to, what's your name, how old are you, do you come this way often, will I see you again? Getting increasingly more creepy specific questions about where I can be found and who I am. And I was 18 at the time, I was just fresh out of school, still really nervous and things. So then I went and I hid in the library because we were going along the road towards my college. I didn't want this guy to see where I went to college. I remember standing there like 9 o'clock in the fucking morning thinking, how did I get from this guy asking me for directions to hiding in the library for half an hour so that he can't see where I'm going? Like, how did it get to this? How did it get to this? And I think that line just really stuck with me. As I said in that sex education video, they sort of talk about this as well, about how, Amy in particular, the character that the assault happens to, is a very nice person and sort of thinks the best of everyone, and it sort of shatters her worldview because, how does it go from just saying hello to somebody to being assaulted? How does it go from saying hello to somebody and being polite and just being courteous to hiding in a library at 9 o'clock in the morning, so because you're scared of them seeing where you go? I don't know, just that line just really hit home to me for some reason. And there's lots of just things in this book that just really, you can really empathise with and understand because we've all been there. How you almost then after that become afraid of being polite to anybody, afraid of answering people who try to just come up to you on the street sort of thing, men and women. Because you don't know how they're going to change that conversation. You don't know how they're maybe going to try and you don't know what's going to happen, and then you spend the rest of the time looking over your shoulder to make sure that this one person can't find you again. So that line really just stood out to me in things. It's just really such a fantastic book with the way that it's written, the sort of multiple format from the poems and the dialogue and stuff, and the way she writes it. As I said, it's very, very heavy material, obviously, yet it's still a really uplifting book because she survives all of that. She survives all of that and comes out of it knowing who she is and able to move forward and yes, you know, and heal, and it's just absolutely incredible. An incredible book, and I'm very, very glad that I found it. I would definitely recommend this for people who are looking to maybe get into non-fiction, because as I said, it's a fictionalised memoir. So it has that crossover between fiction and non-fiction, I think. So if you're looking to get into non-fiction, I reckon, or vice versa, if you're, you know, a non-fiction reader who's trying to get into fiction, I would almost recommend this book, definitely. I think it's just a really, really important book as well, just in the current times, what with Bill Cosby being released, that American fencer who is being investigated for assault yet can still compete in the Olympics, what's going on at Blizzard Entertainment right now. I think it's just more important than ever to be listening to women's stories, taking them seriously, and trying to understand how we can do better in the society to ensure that this doesn't happen. I just wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to the publishing house for this book, which is Onway Press, which is a independent business set up in, works out of Covent Garden in London, and they are a independent publishing house that is run by black women and aims to publish authors of colour and publish stories that they feel are overlooked and, you know, not given the spotlight by bigger publishing companies and things. So yeah, and so far they have just published, you know, hit after hit after hit. I've read 3 of their books at the moment. I've got a 4th pre-ordered, and just so far they're just absolutely killing it, you know. So they published The Marks Left on Her, Dream Country by Ashley Brown, Daughters of Henri with Descendants of the First coming out later this year, and they also have a book called Landfall Mountains coming out later this year. And honestly, they're just absolutely killing it with loads of different stories. You know, that's 2 fantasy books. This one about a sort of Nigerian, ancient, sort of set in sort of like ancient Nigeria with magic, and you follow 2 twins who are sort of like the prophesized returning goddesses of the old sort of like gods and stuff. And it's just honestly such a fantastic book and really, really, really great. So underrated. And then Dream Country, following the 3 siblings, the god of sleep, the god of nightmares, and the god of dreams, who are all suspects in their mother's murder. And the world building in this is so cool. It's sort of, you know, there's Kenyan inspiration, there's Brazilian inspiration, there's Greek inspiration, you know. It's such a fantastic sort of mesh of cultures and things, which I really love seeing. And honestly, these books are just so good. They're such a fantastic company, everything's well priced, everything's, you know, the hardbacks are all really like good quality, the covers are gorgeous. They do like book boxes and stuff, so if you want to get like little bookish items with the book you've ordered, they have those for options, which is really interesting. They do giveaways on their social medias. I won a Daughters of Henri giveaway where I got a t-shirt, a candle, and the hardback of Daughters of Henri for free just before Christmas. And yeah, just if you're looking to support an independent book publishers who publish fantastic stories, you know, like I said, Landfall Mountains is sort of all about like climate change and things like that, which is very, very current, especially in this last week with that report coming out. You know, they just publish such great stories, and such unique stories that I think just get overlooked by the bigger publishing houses who are sort of trying to find, you know, the next big hit, as opposed to trying to find a decent story to publish. Yeah, I'll leave a link to their store below. You know, this isn't sponsored in any way, shape or form, I just really like them. And I think they just, you know, they're an independent business. So yeah, if you're looking for a really great publishing company to support, Onway are definitely the way to go. I'll leave a link to their site down below. They have really, really great books, and I cannot wait for the releases they have for the rest of this year. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry it got a little bit not depressing, but a bit more serious than my other reviews. But obviously I think just with the content for this book, it was necessary, I think, to discuss it in a more serious tone as well. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Have you read The Marks Left on Her? What did you think of it? Definitely let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you've read any other books by Onway Publishing as well, you know, let me know what you think of them. Are you excited for the release of Descendants of the First like I am? Definitely let me know down in the comments. If you reached the end of this video, you clearly enjoyed yourself, so leave a like and definitely leave a comment, as well as feel free to subscribe. I post twice a week, on Tuesdays and Fridays, and occasionally on Saturdays as well if I am posting 3 times a week, but mostly just 2 times. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.